it's just very clear that we are reaching this capacity as humans in our current state of awareness, that our current forms, our current beliefs, our current trauma load cannot be sustained. It's a completely destructive force, and it will take us to our extinction if we don't change course. And so as that awareness increases, that there is another path, because we can imagine it, and now we're seeking that path, and we're really actively pushing into the ethers to try to rewild those dreams, to rewild our day-to-day experiences, so that we can trust that this path is opening up.
Welcome, dear ones, to a fresh episode of All That We Are. Thank you for this month's Soul Space and the opportunity to explore the theme of resilience in ongoing, challenging situations. Our next Soul Space will be on Sunday, June the 9th, on the theme of anchoring our gifts. This is free for all members of All That We Are and open to anyone else listening to join. We have 2 community weekends coming up. Having just come back from a weekend retreat, I am reminded in every cell of my body the potency of these types of gatherings. First up is our Remembering Retreat in the incredible Forest of Dean. This will take place on June 14th to 16th and will be a powerful weekend to reset into presence, transmute some of the energies that are currently working through you, and birth a new way of relating to life. It's the weekend just before the summer solstice, and it will be an experience of nourishing food for your gut, stunning nature, and practices that support beautiful embodiment and giving space for your soul. We'll be staying in a very special place, the Asha Center, where you can really step into a deep space of rest and rejuvenation. The roses will be in full bloom, and we'll be spending time in the forest, the very forest that Lord of the Rings was brought into form. There's a labyrinth, space to meditate, and we'll be doing some beautiful rituals, as well as connecting in space for grief and for celebration. There are a few spaces left for this, and I would love for you to join us if you feel the call, and if you would love to be together in person. And then the first weekend of July, the 5th to the 7th, I'm hosting a weekend of events in Devon, which is where I'm based most of the time. And I would love to call the community that listens to this podcast in South Devon, as well as those around or that want to explore the area, to join us for this. Full details are still coming together, but I wanted to let you save the date, and those of you that know that you already want to come, reserve your spots. What I can tell you is that on the Friday night, we'll have a conversation with some special guests, and the Saturday will be a day retreat with some beautiful practices, circles for us to come together in community, spaces to rest and recharge both soul and body. Both of these will happen in a riverside venue not far from Totnes. On the Sunday, we will go on a pilgrimage on the sacred lands of Dartmoor with wild swimming, a picnic, and climbing a tour. You can follow the links on our events page on allthatweare.org to find out more and to reserve your place. Both of these events are in England, in the UK, and are an opportunity for community that listen to this podcast to come together. Maybe you're coming to England for something else, and this can tie in to your visit. And for those of you that are based here in the UK, this is a really beautiful opportunity to come together and to meet others with shared values and be in a space of connection, healing, joy, and ceremony as we gather together with intention. This episode is another one from my trip to India earlier this year, where we recorded in Oroville at the end of a deep journey. My guest is Zach Bush, who you've met before on this podcast. Zach and I have a running joke of microphones breaking when we get together to record. On the last one, episode 178, his stopped working fully. And on this one, mine pops at some point, and so my audio isn't as clear. It doesn't affect the listening experience too much, but I wanted to let you know, especially as we are quite particular about the sound quality that we like to offer you, because we know that that enables you to drop in deeply and to really feel the transmission of the conversations. Next time Zach and I record together, we will have multiple mics and a sound technician to make sure our energy field does not blow the mics. For those of you new to Zach and his work, he is a physician specializing in internal medicine, endocrinology, and hospice care. He is an internationally recognized educator and thought leader on the microbiome as it relates to health, disease, and food systems. He founded Seraphic Group and the nonprofit Farmer's Footprint to develop root cause solutions for human and ecological health. His passion for education reaches across many disciplines, including topics such as the role of soil and water ecosystems in human genomics, immunity, and gut-brain health. His education has highlighted the need for a radical departure from chemical farming and pharmacy, and his ongoing efforts are providing a path for consumers, farmers, and mega industries to work together for a healthy future for people and planet. His work is creating avenues for collaborative action for all stakeholders in our global community for a regenerative future of health for the planet and our children. In this episode entitled The Golden Path, we explore the themes of rewilding dreams, creative force, and the future of relationships as we speak to the question, how do we journey into our full presence and power? We hope that this conversation opens up a deeper connection with your own presence, pleasure, and authenticity. Welcome to All That We Are, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between activism, the sacred, creativity, and regeneration, the spaces where our inner and outer worlds dance. From healing trauma to nature connection, to new technologies to ancient wisdom, it's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a more beautiful future. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to listen, to ask ourselves the big questions, and to share what we are already doing and envisioning, we create the futures of our wildest dreams. And we begin to embody all that we are becoming, and all that is possible. It is an absolute honor to welcome you back to All That We Are. Zach, thank you for being here and for sharing.
Thrilled to be here with you, Amisha. It's just a blessing to share space-time with you after a couple weeks of some of the most dramatic travel we could have put together with an incredible team of people, and just an honor to be in your presence. And it's a wonderful sense of closure as we say goodbye to everybody, to be able to consolidate some of what's come through, I hope, in honor of this group that's been together, and a lot of strangers who are now close friends. And I love it when that happens. And I honor the way that we've bumped into each other on different sides of the earth over a 2-year period in unexpected ways, not knowing that our paths would cross. And it's just a really reassuring moment, I think, that we're all in the right place at the right moment, and here we are together to share something with your audience. It's pretty wonderful.
What's alive for you today around the notion of the futures of your wildest dreams?
I don't think I have rewilded my dreams enough yet for them to be responsible for my future. I think I have a brighter future than I have allowed my dreams to wild into. And this week and many others in the last few years have been pushing that envelope, and I have been actively rewilding my dreams and rewilding my heart is a big piece of that. I think that the main restrictions that I've had on my capacity to dream have been around the fear of practicing and experiencing unconditional love, and being afraid of ultimately human connection, and probably on a deeper, more ancestral level, afraid of connection to nature, which is to say, afraid that we've somehow fallen out of favor of the divine creative force of this universe. And so just really leaning in to acknowledge that I have turned my future over to something bigger than my dreams at this stage, and look forward to being able to witness more of that future in my dreams as they steadily become more disconnected from my traumatic past of being human, and honoring each of you listening, that in our synergy of dreams we can heighten each other's capacity for that dreaming of the future. But I'm not sure that we have it right now as adults. I just sat with a 10-year-old all morning, just blown away by this young woman. She's dreaming the right dreams. She's dreaming dreams with her sister that passed away, and that sister is coming to her consistently to heighten her capacity of knowing the future in very, very clear terms. And so, in witness to a child who is dreaming wild, and wild enough for all of the answers to be given to her directly from her dream state. And she's shared with me today that she's starting to be able to experience these things in her waking state as well. And so that will be the ultimate rewilding of our future, when we first learn how to dream our futures, and then we learn how to dream those dreams in our waking moments. And that's when we will dissolve the current dream that we've all collaboratively been living in for the last many thousands of years. So some of my thoughts and feelings around that, I guess.
Something that feels really alive from this time that we've been spending together, where it feels really palpable how much the world has changed in the last few years, especially, and how much we've all been invited to change. And I felt this real renewed sense of possibility for where we can go as humans, and what we're being invited into. This sort of understanding of health on the individual level and the community level and the planetary level feels so key to that future.
Yeah. Health is ultimately this expression of reconnection to the creative force that knit us together in the womb from the vacuum space template that we might call a soul or something like that. But reconnecting deeply to this original math within us is the health that would spring out of the biology that's connected to that quantum physics template by which we organize. But we won't realize that until we are connected in a relationship to everything around us. And I think that's where we have been really deeply struggling as humanity, as we thought we had to push back nature in every form. We needed to eliminate our contact to be safe. And so there was some deep wound of abandonment disorder that kind of set in our ancestral pattern, has reinforced it over and over again that we, in fact, do get abandoned by our parents, and the abandonment is not necessarily that they walk out of our lives physically. It's that our parents abandon us when they train us not to dream and not to be connected to what we can see beyond what they can see. And for that, there's a deep abandonment that we are trained in not believing the reality we can see. And we are only rewarded if we see the reality that our parents saw or have trained themselves to see. And so we have been steadily dumbing down the generations to this collective low bar, low vibration expression of our human capacity. And so we are creating abandonment at these fundamental levels of, it's not necessarily our physical being being abandoned, it's our higher self that's being abandoned by our parents systematically for thousands of years. And in that, we have developed a deep sense of insecurity and a deep sense of inferiority to everything around us. And so we can see a lion or, an elephant or a blue whale, and we feel so inferior to these amazing energies that course through these animals. And yet, how much more grand, or how equally grand must the human be? And yet we fail to sit and stare at another human being in the same way that we take long boat rides out to stare at whales jumping out of the ocean. Like, why aren't we marveling at the human that's leaping in and out of planes of consciousness and creative capacity? And we don't look at each other with the same sense of magnificence or wonderment that we do to the rest of nature. And we also, double down on the wounding of humans that we do on our planet. We certainly extract and destroy the planet, but not nearly as violently as we destroy one another. And this is the new definition of health that we need to adopt, is a recognition of the need to reconcile rather than to improve our blood sugar or our blood pressure or our chronological age with biohacking or the number of sleep hours. Like, that's just all a freaking distraction from the real mission we're on here. Like, we need to stop believing in biohacking, and we need to start to believe that biology is met out from the quantum field in perfection, and it's only for our belief of control or our need to control it that we continue to create suffering and pain. And the more people hold up a solution and say, here's the solution, here's, example being regenerative agriculture, here's cover cropping. If, don't worry, climate change isn't going to happen because farmers are starting to use cover crops and starting to use, animal grazing as a technique. So don't worry, we've got this figured out. If there's a devil, that's what it is. It's that thing within us that continues to distract one another from the divine path that we're on. I think the more altruistic the distraction is, the more quote unquote healthful that it sounds, the more damaging it is. The super low vibration stuff, the real traumatizing stuff that we do to each other actually holds a lower vibration of distraction. It's I think more temporary in its distraction. The drugs that we do to distract ourselves are less damaging than these false senses of spirituality or beliefs of, solutions outside of ourselves that then we can chase for decades or lifetimes, thinking we're doing something good because we work in hospitals or because we serve the poor or because we live in a spiritual conscious community and therefore we meditate better than other communities and therefore we must. All of that, I think, that's the devil within us. That's the devil we've created together, is the constant approach to externalizing our problems or externalizing, more dangerously, the solutions. Solutions are not outside of ourselves. They lie within the wounds that we have.
Can you share more about the healing and the medicine being inside the wound?
Yeah. Nature is a system of polarity. And so whether we're talking about down at the quantum physics level of, split atomic particles of quarks and, ultimately the tiniest particle discovered so far, that Higgs boson particle, God particle as they've called it, that they've smashed apart and identified through that, incredible collider that's sitting in Europe. And so we've found it down there at that level, and we find it up at the, galactic levels, and we certainly find it in every level of biologic realities, that you can't have existence of any material without polarity existing within the material. And so at the level of a wound, it is impossible that the antidote isn't there, because the wound itself has defined itself by its polarity with the solution that lies within it. And so we have this perfect polarity in the universe, and what we have learned to do, because we are afraid that we aren't enough, or afraid that we're incomplete, afraid that the source is outside of ourselves, the source of healings, the solutions are outside of ourselves, or the problems that cause the wound are outside of ourselves. Because of all of that externalization, we follow every, distraction out there, Western medicine and allopathic drugs, or, Chinese medicine or functional medicine and all of their hormone therapies and peptide injections and all the crazy shit we're doing right now to each other in the name of health. All of that is taking us away from the opportunity to find the antidote that is purely developed for you, specific to your exact wound, developed in fact by the existence of the wound. The antidote has to lie perfectly within there. And it took me decades of being in the cancer space, and death and dying around hospice for me to start to actually allow my patients to go into their wound. I was reinforcing their behavior of covering up the wound, give them pain meds, give them antibiotics, give them something to palliate the wound. And all I was doing was covering up their capacity to see the actual solution within it. And as I, slowly humbled myself, and before this miraculous thing called a human life, it took me years of realizing that human life and its manifestation of biology from the physics and its manifestation of life from the original math within the vacuum has every piece of the future, past, present coded within it already. The quantum physics knows absolutely no time. And so your template, your soul, knows no biologic time. It knows no chronologic time. And so the future math is the same as the present math, the same as the past math. And when we align to that, we heal constantly. And so the fabric of reality ensures that the antidote is within every wound. And when we stop palliating each other's wounds, which we do certainly through medicine, but I think, perhaps more toxic in some ways is what we do at the societal level, is we socially try to palliate each other's wounds. And a lot of this is being taught as empathy, but I think empathy is ultimately one of the more narcissistic expressions that we currently have. It's fine to be empathic, to be able to sense somebody else's, feelings or emotional journey that they may be identifying with. It's a beautiful thing to be able to sense that and come into awareness of it. But when we then put ourselves in that vibration and go sit with that person and just, say to them, I share your pain, I'm in your pain with you, I feel your pain. And, this is why I feel your pain, is because I had this source of pain. And all we're doing is reinforcing the vibration of the wound. And we do that so that we can, excuse the way we feel inside. Because we don't want to believe that our suffering is from inside of us and something we can fix. And so if we can find somebody else that's suffering the same way we are, we love that. And so we call that empathy right now in our current social structure. And you hear people say, well, I'm such an empath and I'm this or that. And you can feel them dive to the lowest common denominator of energy oftentimes when they're in that codependent version of empathy or empathic behavior. And so, again, the altruism of being an empath will take us, centuries perhaps to detoxify from, because it's actually ultimately not supposed to be an empathic, mirroring of each other's, most difficult or lowest vibrations. We're supposed to be able to hold a high vibration for one another so that those that are going through a valley of death, going through a valley of transformation and destruction, have some caliber, something that's calibrated at the highest vibration possible for them to have a North Star during their transit. And so ultimately that word is compassion, not empathy. And so to be compassionate is to be able to feel where the other person is at and immediately heighten our mode, move to the opposite polarity of that. And that will draw them into their solution. If I hold the high vibration that matches the antidote within their wound, they're going to find that antidote very quickly.
And there's a boundary that's still in place.
It has to be a boundary. If we go around matching the vibration of everything around us and not understanding that it's a relationship between two sovereign entities that have their own direct relationship to source and therefore their direct and unique experience moment to moment, if we try to match or meet somebody else's experience, then we're denying that we're on our own path. We're denying our actual, resource of connection to source. And I've watched it with whole churches. We've toured, a couple of communities that the world would probably consider a cult and things like that in the recent weeks here. As we've traveled within these communities, they think they are the most spiritual, community around, and they feel like they're on this great experiment of consciousness and spirituality. And yet over a couple of decades, each of them has fallen into these deep ruts of behavior that are cult-like, and that they have come to believe that something in the past or somebody other than themselves is their path to healing or the divine, to God, whatever it is. And so we create these systems of human behavior that are so ironic. Here's I found God, and then you go and check it out, and it's like, no, it's just piles and piles of rules and restrictions and absolute opposite of freedom. And this 10-year-old girl I was kind of asking around it this morning, as we were sitting there, really basking in the wisdom of a child. And I was like, what do you think of God? And she was experiencing the reality a few lifetimes forward, and she was telling us what that's going to feel like. And then she suddenly zipped to the present with her answer, and she said it so clearly. She's like, it's ridiculous to even think that you can pray to God. She's like, God isn't here right now. God created everything so that you would be connected to everything. God will come back into your presence at some point, but you're not lacking the presence of God, And she said, stop praying to some thing that was here before and pray to what's been created now. Pray to the animals around you, and they will come into a deep communion with you. And she had examples of this, like mongoose that it was laying out on the top bar of her bike this morning when she was going to ride to school. And the mongoose was literally just laying there sprawled out, and she just approached and, basically gave prayer to the mongoose, gave respect to this deity on her bike. And the mongoose continued to lounge on the bike as she got on and rode all the way to school, and it rode the bike with her. And she was in fellowship with this mongoose on this trip. And she was just so matter of fact about it that it just felt so ridiculous ultimately as to the lengths and ends we go to try to convince each other that somebody found God and has built great edifices and golden temples, light temples, and all the things that we create in an effort to capture the vibration of the likeness of God that we may have encountered in some previous person or conversation or some text that we read. And to hear people throwing scriptures at each other basically in the last couple of weeks, trying to prove their spirituality, and then talking about all of their dreams for their communities because they're conscious communities and spiritual communities. It's just a desecration ultimately, which is actually one of my favorite quotes of the 20th century. Wendell Berry is one of my superheroes of the 20th century, and got to actually talk to him recently. He's really up there in years now, but he was walking on his farm when his caretaker was able to get a hold of me, and had a conversation with him in the farm field, and feeling his vibration after decades and decades of being an observer of nature. He's one of our greatest poets of the 20th century. He's written reams and reams of material in witness to nature. But one of my favorite quotes from Wendell Berry is, "Until we see all spaces as sacred, we will only know desecrated spaces." And we're watching that literally happen in the community that we've been visiting here in India. Is the spiritual, quote unquote, spiritual community of 55 years is finding itself at this moment of death, probably, as the Indian government kind of comes in to take over the space. And it's so obvious that there was a void there that nature was going to have to fill, and it's filling it with bulldozers and new roads and construction over this self-proclaimed paradise that's been built here in 55 years. But when you're in it, it doesn't feel like paradise. It feels like a human attempt at it. And maybe that's why I felt so clear when you asked the question of what's the dreams in the future. Is like, I'm sitting here in a place that people dreamed up was the future. In fact, it's some very, very, extreme miss of what we want the future to feel like, but it was their greatest dream. And so it wasn't their fault. It wasn't like they were wrong. It's just that they had their true capacity to dream within the bounty and glory of nature got truncated at some point because of their parents, because of the human journey.
Well, one of the things that we've experienced on this trip, but also is just there, is in so much of the way that we live, is that we give this divine authority to people that may or may not have existed, or to people that have died a long time ago. And the reality is, if those people were here and alive today, they'd be saying something different because their consciousness would have also moved on and evolved. And so then we get stuck, and there doesn't seem to be that space for the wisdom of the people that are here now to fully express what's alive in them. And it feels like then by doing that, it's the externalization of that divine force to something else that's external, that is no longer living. And in doing that, people associate the moments of divinity that they experience within themselves as being connected to something outside of themselves, and then spend a whole lifetime in devotion or searching for that spark again, when, as we know, that can just happen anywhere, and it can happen in the most simple moments of our lives. For me, I realized that in these years that I've been with my mother, like my mother, who's not very well the last few years, is when I've really understood the sacredness of life and the sacredness of myself and the way that divine energy moves through me. And it was in absence of all of that, like just in very practical day-to-day things around people that are not speaking in these languages or in these ways, but an opportunity to really like anchor into the way that divine beauty moves through me, moves through you, moves through each of us. And then in community, we have this opportunity just to highlight bits of it, to move bits of energy, like just to allow that force field that enables us to just step deeper and fuller into who we are.
Absolutely. And that's kind of that path of compassion that we've been traveling with this group of 10 to 15 people at different times. And was one of the most dramatic examples that I've ever lived through of people becoming so present at such a high vibration that they unlock the codes within others around them. And I watched it happen kind of one-on-one most effectively, but there was also just this group unlocking that happened. But it was so profound to watch an individual suddenly become so present that they spoke this deep truth that suddenly triggered, an opening in another person. They would burst out crying, or they would suddenly open their own channel of truth, and the vibrations were so high in the group just after 2 or 3 days, let alone what's happened over the course of the trip. And so I'm just really excited because I think it's emblematic, because I experienced some version of this with a group of 40 people in Egypt a couple months ago, and it's just very clear that we are reaching this capacity as humans in our current state of awareness that our current forms, our current beliefs, our current trauma load cannot be sustained. It's a completely destructive force, and it will take us to our extinction if we don't change course. And so as that awareness increases, that there is another path, because we can imagine it, and now we're seeking that path, and we're really actively pushing into the ethers to try to rewild those dreams, to rewild our day-to-day experiences, so that we can trust that this path is opening up. And it's not something we have to create. We don't have to go build the path. We just need to step onto the path. And then the abundance that's on that path will just be insane. But as soon as you step onto your path and you're in a typical social environment, people will immediately try to knock you off the path with fear, guilt, and shame. And they will use every tactic possible in their thing to try to get you back off the path and back in the morass with them, because they're afraid of being alone, and they're afraid of death, and they're afraid of being alone. They're afraid of not having enough. They're afraid that they're not enough ultimately. And if you go and step on a path and you suddenly have this elevated experience, then they have to deal with the fact that maybe they're not in the right space, and they're going to have to do the work to go find the path and or let the path show up under their feet and humble themselves to the point where that shows up. And so the world, despises that person suddenly stepping onto their golden path, and will target them for long periods of time, to the point of their execution oftentimes. The doctors that I've worked with over the last couple of decades, we went through a rash of homicides to these doctors that were finding their way into truth, and they were finding it in their laboratories ultimately. And ironically, we were finding ourselves, approaching truth about the vitality within breast milk. And it was in this research that was starting to uncover these peptides within breast milk as potent sources of healing within the body, reconnecting mankind to the mother through these peptides, that we suddenly saw them, labs broken into, things burned down, killed. We had lost like 65 of them in just like an 18-month period. This was years ago now, but it's just so indicative that as you step onto a golden path and you find a golden truth, the world will literally kill you for showing them the possibility of a different path, because it's so terrifying that we're going to have to change everything. And that's most frightening to the people that have the most to lose into the current system. And so that's where we see billionaires and politicians and everything else starting to act in seemingly very evil ways. It's not evil, I don't think. I think it's just a natural human defense mechanism of resisting change and being afraid of losing your belief that your wealth creates control of your future. And anybody who's ever amassed any amount of wealth, I think, will tell you that they're more, often more lost and more desperate than they were when they didn't have the wealth. And so it's become very clear to almost everyone that the wealth is not the path of control, but subconsciously we can't shake that belief that if I don't have any money, I have no control of my destiny. If I have money, I have control, because there's so much daily evidence of it. Well, I can buy a plane ticket and go there, so wealth must be my freedom. And I think that really what it is your path is, once there and abundant, will deliver it. Once again, turning to this 10-year-old wisdom this morning, she said that in our next iteration of humanity, just a generation or two out, we're going to be reaching levels of resonance in which we don't need to eat. We can eat, we can enjoy food, but we no longer have a need for food, because she said that everything that you enjoy doing will feed you. If you're a marathon runner, the marathon will literally give you every nutrient and every protein your body needs to restore after the marathon, and there will be no sense of need or scarcity in your body, because everything you are doing in joy will feed you. And then immediately around the circle, the adults there started realizing, I've experienced that. I've been able to go breatharian because I found this passion. I started doing sacred dance or whatever it is. Like, there was all these rad examples around the room of us realizing this. 10-year-old simply showed us that this was true, that when you are on your path and when you are in your true joy, not your drugged out happiness or diluted state of belief of pleasure at some lower frequency, this is your high pleasure. This is your highest vibrational thing, and it is food itself. It is nourishment at a level that our current food system can't supply. And so may we be nourished by that what we find our joy in, and that what we do. And she kept emphasizing that whatever you do is feeding you. Whatever you really do that's on this path is feeding you. And so there's just no reason to worry, because you don't need anything as long as you stay true to your path. It's potent.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced that in these days, and we've been very well fed on this adventure. But many times the plate of food has arrived and I've been like, I'm full.
There's so much energy in our bodies
so
from non-food sources.
And we haven't needed very much sleep.
Yeah.
And all of it, because there's just been so much energy. And the other thing that I've experienced on this and also before and other moments of my life is some of the most profound moments of shift. They happen with something so simple, a joke, a bit of eye contact, a hand at the right moment. It doesn't have to be a whole dramatic thing. And sometimes it does for some people in some moments. If we can live in a way where we're really open and really in that alignment and in our integrity and in our joy, then we're able to create these moments of connection and reconfiguration in the simplest of ways wherever we go. And then it doesn't have to be this whole thing that you have to pay thousands of pounds to go and do this course or to do that or to go into this ceremony or to do that. It's literally just by our being and our being with each other. And then it moves beyond classes, because it's in every interaction. It's in the interaction when you're in the shop. It's in the interaction when you're waiting for a bus. Whatever it is, that we can have these moments of pulling each other into that space, and from this way where we hold that energy and we allow other people to come into their beauty, or we receive that. And so living in this space of receptivity and not making it so complicated.
Yeah, I think so. And I think if we look at that kind of like Maslow's, layers of, human behavior, starting with like first fear, not enough food, second fear, can't reproduce. So it's like food, sex, these basic, kind of drives was the theory that exists in there. And yet when we come into our highest vibrational expression of ourselves, in the same way that we don't need food, sex takes on a whole different purpose, and it doesn't need to be practiced in sexuality. Sex can actually become a vibrational experience that requires no physical stimulus. It's an energetic, phenomenon. There's like a whole category of this apparently in the current, worlds that my daughter's introduced me to over the years. Her generation is working very hard to decloak and deprogram our gender roles and our gender identities and sexuality and all this and sexual identities. And she struck on a title I think is called demisexual, which is that sexuality can only be accessed through intellectual connection. So that's one of the many examples of what we can start to realize in our next iterations of society, is that what we're seeking in maybe a high vibration, maybe a low vibration of physical contact right now, can be achieved through, like you said, the touch of the hand at the bus stop or whatever it is. Like that's what we will do. True sex magic. Cheeky smile at the right moment. And that little spark in the eye of humor or whatever it is, like that's ultimately the sex magic that we learn in texts like manuscripts and other places that have blown my mind, of like, wow, when I become so present that I am actually an orgasmic force because of my presence, it suddenly just relieves everything. In the same way it's such a relief when you do a 5-day fast or something like that, when you realize my body absolutely does not hunger. It doesn't need food. Like I can go in this completely different relationship with food. In the same way, sexuality as a base drive within us suddenly can be transmuted into a high frequency pathway to communication. And in communication, we reach connection. In connection, we become a force of creation. Mm-hmm. And so this is ultimately what how sexuality leads to fertility, that would lead to a baby, is it is an aligned frequency of communication at the energetic level that would make enough space in the womb for a being to express itself. It's really not. The longer I'm in this, and I used to run fertility clinics and stuff like that as an endocrinologist, so I was so programmed, well, it's your estrogen, progesterone, and the sperm and the egg. No, not really. Fertility.
It's your age.
Yeah, exactly. If you're over this age, you can't have kids.
You have to freeze your eggs. You have to do this. You have to do that. Like
all these hoops to jump through on the biologic level, and when in fact, the moment of conception is a purely energetic event. Really, it takes so much quantum physics alignment to allow for the zinc flash to happen. There's this flash that happens inside of the egg the moment that conception results, and this bright flash has been recorded now many times in vitro settings, and that flash is such a potent transmutation of elements that it allows a soul or some sort of template within the vacuum space that we might call a soul to connect to that biologic potential in a single cell. And suddenly if that alignment is pure and is harmonized enough, then that cell will begin to divide rapidly and then line up, self-organizing along this template, this invisible template of the quantum field of that, based on the vibration of mathematics of that soul. And so to now rethink conception or fertility, we need to understand that sex magic is about ultimately harnessing the energy of two beings, both of which are burning about 10,000 times brighter than a cubic centimeter of the sun. Each cubic centimeter of biology in the multicellular form, where you have mitochondria and all that going, you're about 10,000 times more sunlight per cubic centimeter than the sun produces. And so that potent shift from physics to life is about 1,000 to 10,000 fold leap in concentration of light energy. So then you imagine two of those bright beings coming near each other in some form of beautiful polarity, supercharging each other's ability to leap to these higher frequencies of existence. And so, not to be too graphic here, I guess, but when you see people go into orgasm, they typically go through a process of breath work. And so they're breathing, then they get the DMT release. And the first thing that starts to, as DMT hits, that they start saying, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." And that process of DMT release is the same thing you watch happen when you give, a plant medicine to somebody. They go into these awestruck states, amazement, and they start saying things like light, love, light, love, light, love. And then they suddenly start saying, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." And so that pattern of experience when the egoic, death happens is, first you just see raw beauty, and then you start to understand, the fabric of the universe is this thing that we can't help but call God. People say, "Oh God," during that orgasmic DMT state, whether they believe in God or not. And so it's beautiful to see that. And what I saw in the ICUs over and over and over again, especially in my hospice work, is people are getting that DMT hit at the end of life. And this has been well recorded. It's not me discovering that, but what I saw is people from every different walk of life, every different political and socio-religious, socio-spiritual identity coming to the oh God moment of, oh God, I just dipped across the veil, and it is so beautiful and it is so divine. And I came face to face with God. And so this is a beautiful journey that we're in, I think, of realizing we don't need the food in its current form to be nourished. In fact, when we stop putting the current food system in our bodies, we immediately up our vibration, because the current food system is lowering our vibration. Our current expression of sex is lowering our vibration. And so when you go into abstinence, or you go into, tantric kind of withholding of your output of orgasmic energy, you start to hold that energy and understand that you are a vessel of light at the biologic level, holding in your water crystals inside of your cells, you're holding light, and your capacity to start to increase, your literal capacitance, or your storage capacity for that light energy. Suddenly sexuality takes on a completely different manifestation. And this is, I think, where we start to realize that stories like Isis and Horus and all these, pieces of mythology that have come through the ages. Isis was the mother of Horus, and sex magic has been most defined in the energies of those two entities. Some people hold that there's a sexual charge or some sort of, sexual relationship there, maybe in this more common sense of the word sex. But in my witnessing of childbirth, that woman will never be in a higher state of DMT and physical activation of the God force than in the moment that child is born. The labor process will take her through the breath work and ultimately the DMT release. And the child is having that DMT release at the same time the mother is. As it enters this world, it is in a full-blown DMT journey, and it is seeing for the first time with human eyes. And I think it needs the DMT to handle what it's about to experience, because it's about to witness a world that is far less than what it just came out of. And so it needs DMT to understand, yes, I know it looks terrifying to become human, because you are so suddenly in a very finite reality and you're an infinite being, and that must be terrifying. But the DMT there pierces the veil back to your infinite self. And so that we know that mother and child have DMT release then, and we know that people at the moment of death have DMT release. And we know that sexual work, breath work, sound bath, plant medicine, all these things can take people into DMT experiences where, yes, there's ego death, but more importantly, probably is it pierces the veil for a moment for your finite experience to be grounded in your infinite reality. And you start to appreciate why you picked a finite moment. Like, why would you sign up to be human and separated from the divine in your egoic journey now through 40,000 generations of trauma? Like, why the hell would you do that? Because you want to feel the finite reality around you so you can see beauty more acutely and experience beauty in a physical state of feeling rather than an energetic state of vibration. Our capacity to feel is so potent. And so we will start to practice sex moment the moment we enter the world. This magic of being able to heighten one another's experience of the divine through coordinated breath, the heart coherence between a child coming into this world and its mother, the heart coherence of lovers having an experience together, the heart coherence of 400 people in reverence to the divine together in ceremony. All of these moments are taking us into these massive harmonic experiences that are ultimately elevating our understanding of why we're here, where we came from, who we are, and where we might be going next. And so that's such a relief, I think, through the voice of a child this morning, to be reminded how good it feels not to need these base physical things and to jump the height up so that everything we do feeds us. The marathon feeds us. Everything we do creates an opportunity for some version of a DMT release, because we are in such an ecstatic state of presence for one another and ultimately for ourselves that we can have that oh God, oh God, oh God experience every second.
And that comes through in all states of external circumstances, and that's the that's the thing, to be able to really experience that level of beauty no matter what's happening around us, and not to get pulled into the stories of good and bad and right and wrong and me versus them and all of that, into just this space of, this is the energy that we are bringing, that we are holding, that we are cultivating, and that we can share more of this.
So good. That's exactly right. It brings to mind just the word power in English, I think, is very misused and misunderstood and has a lot of appropriately negative connotations and baggage on it. But the French word for it is basically, in my English pronunciation of it, is presence. And so the root of the French and the languages that preceded English, taking us back even into Sanskrit, weren't power for, the fake, that it's not control, which is, I think, what people hear now. Like, if somebody is in power, then they control, or they, have something over somebody else. And that's just not the meaning of the word. That's maybe force, but not power. And power is presence. And so what you're really describing is this journey into our full power, our full presence. And then there is nothing that can knock us off the path. There's nothing that can, quote unquote, hurt us. Because if we're present enough, these lower vibrations of attack that humanity might be throwing at us just have no impact. That's the silver lining of this cancel culture that we've stepped into in the last couple of years, where guilt and shame were exercised as a weapon, and social isolation or ostracizing others was seen as a potent form of punishment for misthinking or thinking outside of the social group think. Had such a silver lining, because many of my colleagues who got canceled for saying things around an alternative narrative as to what was going on, now I go visit their homes around the world, and they are in just such a freaking blessed state, and they're so grateful for the cancellation, and they're making less money than they've ever made in their lives, and they've never been more happy, because being canceled from the vibration of this social pleasing, social conformity had them in such a diminished state of their existence, and it had been so normalized as success, that it took something as dramatic as being, quote unquote, canceled to actually start to breathe and live again. And so we can all hope that we get canceled from our current, cultural, social nightmare that we've agreed to be in. We need to get canceled from that space. We need to be ejected from that dream. And we can do that voluntarily. Like, you don't have to wait for something to do this. You can just simply stop opening your Instagram account, and you can simply stop believing that what other people are experiencing in your presence has anything to do with your power. Your power is your presence, and there's nobody who can knock you out of your capacity to be in power. There's nobody that can knock you out of your presence. It's a choice every time, if you're going to let go of your presence, if you're going to outsource your life to distraction rather than, that's the decision you're making, and it's neither good nor bad, but you have to have radical responsibility for it. And so this is ultimately the self-discipline that I'm constantly engaged in these days, it feels like, because it's such a constant surrendering, such a constant reprogramming necessary, because every single day I run into new layers of these triggers or things that will default me back to these old patterns of behavior. I'm hopeful that the more time I spend in this resonance field, I'm not reaching some sort of state of enlightenment, but instead, in my highest states of resonance, I'm bringing people towards me through the law of attraction, which is one of the basics of natural law. Through the law of attraction, I'm attracting those higher vibrations, so that when I do fall out, I have somebody who's compassionate towards me, not empathic towards me, but compassionate, and holding their high vibration, so that I can quickly descend, find the wound, reveal the antidote, and rise right back up. And that's what I was witnessing this week in this group, is people were healing 40, 50, 500-year-old traumas in a matter of minutes, and they would burst out crying, identify the wound, sit and steep in the wound. They weren't trying to run away from the pain, and they were able to stay in the wound so effectively because they had people who were immediately compassionate around them, holding this high vibration of, I see your truth uncovering. I'm already celebrating this. I'm so excited to see what happens in the next few minutes as you come through this. Like, there was this anticipation of birth, rebirth around the air that we were breathing together that was allowing people to trust their own journey so much more rapidly, instead of having to go through 15 years of psychotherapy, it was 15 seconds of compassion and this high vibration excitement of congratulations, you're graduating from that subconscious behavior and you're going to upgrade. And so this is the blessing that we are seeking. So I think we need to lose the belief of spiritual communities that are going to reach enlightenment through silence and meditation. And we need to realize that silence and meditation is an opportunity for you to find your own vibration, to find your own presence. And then the presence sets you on the path towards community. And the community is the heaven we're all looking for. And it's the thing that we most fear we can't create. And we keep screwing up communities all over the world because we haven't solved for the one simple issue of presence.
Thank you for tuning in. If you are enjoying this episode, do join our membership. For a small contribution, you can be part of our community, where we deepen the conversation and offer spaces of learning and embodiment.
One thing that's clear is there is more content that is being produced on this planet than is humanly consumable. We have created more television and more podcasts that humans will ever be able to listen to. And so one of the most important parts about life is discovering discernment about the content you're consuming. And I would just strongly encourage you to lean in with Amisha and really experience the conversations that she is finding around the world. And for the last 7 years has really developed a gift for bringing out of her guests and out of herself the truths that are most authentic within an individual. And when you feel the vibration of authenticity, it up-levels your capacity to presence. And in that presence, you get to really embody power. And in your power, you start to follow this extraordinary path into the natural law of attraction, abundance, polarity, gifting, and ultimately pleasure on levels you can't imagine. And so follow Amisha on this journey into this, and I guarantee you this will be content that will nourish the soul and the spirit on levels beyond the words, and will prepare you for a richer journey into your life.
Head to allthatweare.org/membership to find out more and join today.
Yeah, I've been reflecting on the role of meditation and silence, and I feel like if it is important, if you don't know how to drop into that state as a way of training to kind of come out of the field of distraction and be able to drop into that. But once you have that, then you don't have to follow these rules of like, I will sit like this for 20 minutes in this posture every day, and it has to be like that, otherwise it will disappear. Then it's entering into a space of such self-knowing and trust and presence that you don't need to go into like those states in a kind of regimented way, that silence becomes available to you wherever you are. And even within community, we've been really, like, we had a very full schedule and I've taken moments of deep silence at a noisy dinner table in order just to like bring my energy back in for a moment and to be able to listen deeper to what's happening around me as well as within me. And so it's a time of, we have all of this ancient wisdom, we have all of these incredible tools, and they're so easy to access now, and they're there for us in order to find that pathway to that space within ourselves. And once we have that, we can keep going back into those tools as and when, but we just live them and we don't get caught up in all of the rules.
I've been studying natural law quite a bit the last couple of years. I've been putting together this nonprofit with a wonderful group of people, the Institute of Natural Law. And the purpose of it is for us to have a playground to start playing in the understanding of natural law as a fundamental series of phenomena that happen at every biologic and physics level of the universe. And so whether you be a star, an earthworm, or a human, these natural laws dictate the fabric and behavior of the universe and the behavior ultimately of species. And so the deeper I've looked into this topic of natural law, the more I just see so obvious these base wounds or source injuries that we carry around with us that then dictate all this damaging behavior around us, this extractive scarcity model that we are living by as a society. And the fundamentals there around natural law are just so exciting because it basically is helping us understand that presence is the beginning of the journey of life. And so the presence that occurs the moment that you are conceived, and then the presence by which you presence the vacuum space within that womb such that you can self-organize biology around that template of a human life, and then watching that human life go through its DMT journey to connect the infinite to the finite at the moment of birth and go into heart synchrony with the mother, and the mother being a broad term there because it's not just mom and sitting there birthing the child. It goes into heart coherence with humanity. So that child is such a close connection to original source vibration and source information that all of humanity, I think, is improved by every birth that comes in this world. And we're seeing extraordinary birth rates right now in a couple of continents that are left with fertility right now. But those numbers will decline over the next 10 years, as they have over the last 50. And we will see India and Africa catch up with declines that we've seen in every Western country. We now have 1 in 3 males infertile in the world, really. And so it's like this terrifying speed towards the decline in biologic fertility. And I think that is reflective of this failure of presence as we get more and more deluded about what's real and what's God outside of ourselves, and what we need to go chase to become more spiritual, or what we need to go chase to become more satiated, what kind of food we need to try so that we can biohack our way to more youth, or what special coffee do we need to buy so that we have lower glycemic index, or all these ridiculous things that are thrown at us as if there were solutions to our condition. The natural law solves for all of that, and it brings us into presence first. And once you are present, you become sovereign. In your sovereignty, you attract to you everything that you would possibly need to support your path. The marathon becomes the nourishment. Your journey literally will nourish you and will provide everything you need for that journey that you've chosen for yourself. And so the path is your nourishment. The journey is your mother, ultimately. And so it's time for you to stop holding your parents, your biologic parents, accountable for your moods or your genetics or whatever it is, and start to hold yourself accountable for the birthing journey of your own path. And that birth, rebirth that you're going to go on as you face the death of everything that needs to die within you, you're going to get more and more nourished by the journey, and you'll have more and more of what you need. The law of attraction is governed by this polarity phenomenon. That which you think you are will attract its opposite to show you the potency of who you are. Like, you will become potent by the negative charge that your positive charge brings. And so and that's the concept of Ubuntu, basically, in the African, cultures. I am because you are. And that kind of reality is really potent, I think, to our future. Maybe it's appropriate that there's jackhammers going behind me right now, just kind of destroying whatever last remnants of sanity I have. I'm trying to hold on to right now. Like, we need it vibrated out of us right now. And the vibration of destruction, that jackhammer that's in your heart right now, is trying to drill through layers of your egoic shields so that you can hear these words, not for the words or the attributed meanings, but for the vibration behind this conversation, so that you can melt and burn it down. Just burn it down. Anything you can identify in you as a need or a fear or guilt or shame, burn it down as fast as possible, as quick as possible, and do that in community that you are capable of attracting to you if you're willing to receive it. If your narrative is, I never fit in and I don't have any friends and I don't trust anybody, you got to burn that down first. Burn down your belief system that you're isolated. It's impossible you're isolated because you're alive. To become alive, you had to be a coherent ecosystem of energy fields, and you've got hundreds of thousands of species within every quarter centimeter of your body. You are so loaded with life as a human being, life beyond human. You are microbes, you are the fungi, you are the soil, you are the plant, you are the seed, you are the tree, you are all of that is growing within you in these organ systems that are so divinely appointed. And so lose the narrative of I am alone. And it's the hardest one to shake. I do it all the time. I had to die to it over and over again the last couple of days because I have some transitions happening around some of my friendships and kind of close relationships that I have in the U.S. right now, because my path is taking me so far abroad now. It's disrupting the previous patterns of communication and, shared time that was the foundation of those previous relationships. And so to feel those changing with your own family is super intense. To feel it happening with your friends and colleagues is intense. To feeling it happen to your own sense of work, whatever you think your occupation is, like you have this dedicated relationship to it. And as you go on your path, your occupation is going to fall away as a priority. And your new sense of creativity, your new sense of productivity only has to do with, am I taking the next step on my path, and what are the resources I need to call in and activate and then utilize in that next thing. That is your occupation. That is what should occupy your time. And so that was hard for me, because it's hard for all of us, but I'd spent 17 years in academic medicine and then another decade practicing medicine after that. And to really close my clinic and let go of that I am a daily doctor kind of identity was one of the most terrifying things I've ever done, because I had spent so much time and money. And I'm like, what if I die in a few years or 20 years or 40 years, realizing that I spent half of my adult life training into something that I ultimately just surrendered into the cosmos because it wasn't serving me or humanity on my path. Will I regret that deeply? Will I see that as a great loss? And of course, the moment I let go of it, the acceleration of my path was so ludicrous that I couldn't actually imagine going back and restarting my clinic again to try to go back to that codependent reality. I was depending on my sense of self-worth by my altruistic, reaching down to palliate my patients' wounds so they would not find the antidote within them, so that they would continue to need me. Like, it was a really screwed up situation. And once I stepped out of it and saw my patients just launch into the stratosphere with their health, because they had been on a biologic health journey, that they were now seeing me as their doctor that helped them to solve cancer or help them overcome some, life-threatening situation. And so they followed me for 10 years in that now emotional and psychological and spiritual codependence of, we went on this healing journey together, and because of me, you had this experience, and blah, blah. When I decided I was going to close my clinic, I didn't decide. When the universe showed me my clinic was closing, I wasn't courageous enough to close it on my own. I think I just had to have the clear message, it is closing, start to deal with this. And I was immediately surrounded by my closest friends in that moment, literally sitting in the room with me as this came to fruition. And they just were holding me in such a high vibration of love that I was able to go into that depth and come back out within an hour or two. It was such a dramatic, death rebirth process. But I remember the fear I had felt at my cellular level of, like, this could be the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. This could be, I'll be shunned by my, medical community. I'll lose credibility in, the world's view or whatever it was.
And you couldn't have imagined what would open up.
Could not have imagined, because I haven't rewilded my dreams. I'm not dreaming well. I don't dream big enough. I don't dream wild enough.
I don't know. Your dreams seem pretty big and wild to me.
I mean, in some ways, that's my concern, is that, as you start to quote unquote dream big in the human construct right now, you can start to get used to that. Like, oh yeah, my dreams are really big. But then the universe will take you to a moment where you have to surrender the thing that you've been working on from your dreams, your effort to manifest the quote unquote dream, because the universe is like, dude, that was like 1.0, let's go do 3.0. We already have 3.0 in your future. Do you want it or not? Are you willing to let go of your little Lego set so that we can actually build you a palace? It's like, and so this is where we need to also be cautious of telling each other, probably, like, oh my God, that's such a big dream, or that's so grandiose. Like, no, we should probably always be like, oh, that's really cool. I wonder what your next iteration will be. And that's the only kind of relationships I can now find myself in, is if that's not the constant question of what comes next for you, then that person is going to start to palliate some old version of myself that I'm really comfortable slipping into, because that means I don't have to change. I don't have to transform anymore, because that person loves me back there at that other version of myself. And that's how we end up in relationship, really slowing down each other's growth and stagnating. So not that relationship is bad. I think relationship's absolutely necessary. Like we saw this week with all these new friendships that have cropped up. People say something about their relationship with mother, unlock a code in somebody else, and they heal. And so it's not that relationship has never been more important for us to double down on, but the nature of our relationships has to fundamentally change to an understanding that it is a soil phenomenon. Relationships should look like soil systems, which are constantly dying, composting all of the nutrients that were just created. Think of a tree as an amazing example. these oak trees that stand around my house in Virginia. I live in a just gorgeous forest in Virginia, the Appalachian Mountains, and these trees put in on these massive canopies in the spring, and they're just like glowing green. Virginia literally vibrates in the frequency of green for many months in those early things, and it's punctuated by these 60-foot bouquets of flowers. We have more flowering deciduous trees in our county than anywhere else in the United States, and so it's literally, driving through a botanical garden for hundreds of kilometers to this region, and then summer turns into this rich, humid rainforest, almost like feel to it. And then fall goes into the most spectacular explosion of colors as those deciduous trees goes into reds and yellows and oranges and green. Just every hue you can imagine of sunset is being expressed in the canopies of the trees. And then, by God, those freaking trees dump all those leaves and turn them into composted soil over the next couple of months. And it's just dumbfounding to me just how elated the tree is to drop its leaves, because it just created the most glorious crown that it could ever have. And so we have a tendency to be so afraid of putting down our crown, putting down what we just created. And we're like, then suddenly our validity and our value is based on what we just built. And I did that to myself for decades, where I should have probably, if I really wanted the fastest path for my creative force, I would have let go of my clinic 5 years, or maybe 10 years even, but 5 years certainly before I did. But it took my human, the extra 5 years beyond when my spirit knew I was done. I had to let my human catch up through the grief process that I was slowly going through subconsciously, of knowing that thing was dying. That part of me was going to die. And then it finally closed, and I was suddenly rebirthed, and springtime came again. And the bounty was so much more than the previous growing season. So we need to see relationships in the same way. That was my relationship to my clinic, but my two marriages, the most beautiful journeys of my life in so many ways. And my first marriage was so extraordinary. It was a 20-year relationship, married for 18 of those years, 2 amazing children came out of that. And that woman is just one of my most valued partners in life right now. Like, just when we go and hang out with our kids or whatever it is on their journeys, our kids are getting married and doing their adult things, and that creates these natural social milestones that bring us back together as a family. And feeling that woman in my presence is so lovely, because she remembers the journey. She knows how much we have both let go of to become the people we are today. And one of the things we had to let go of to allow each other to grow to the potent and unconditional love that we now have for each other, we had to let go of the very construct of marriage as a box for our relationship to be in. And we created so much suffering within ourselves. We didn't hurt each other, we hurt ourselves in those last 10 years of a 20-year journey, when spiritually we already knew, energetically we knew. She psychologically knew way before I found out at the moment that she announced that it was done. But my brain was so slow to know what my heart and spirit probably already knew long before. And for that, we create great suffering, because society had told me, and I identified at a very early age, that my value is going to be a monogamous great husband and have great children that will be fathered with a great dad who's always present. And so that was my value system. And when I felt like that was shattering or being taken away from me, I felt like I would have no value in the world. And I went through some very difficult years of rebuilding, and it was just, being with my children every single day in those next couple of years and watching them stay on their path, and realize that the changes in my relationships had nothing to do with their path in some ways. Their path is a divine path that has to do with relationships with, God itself, with nature itself, and the aspects that they have in relationship to me or their mother, or the respective relationship of their mother and I. Those are just like little brush strokes on the canvases that decorate the landscape of their path. And it's not like the rocks in their path or whatever it is. They will design the rocks in their path such that they choose the right winding curves ahead, and they will create those circumstances themselves. I won't create their rocks. They will create the rocks that they need, because I can't guess the wounds that they need to find the antidotes that they desire in their own life. They will design those. Their higher self already knows that what's going to be necessary to pierce and wound that being to the point of its discovery of deepest healing. And so that whole journey, I think, has really revealed to me that in this future world that we already know isn't real in our hearts and minds, and therefore is real somewhere in the multiverse, I suppose, But in this current realization, we're going to have such a looser hand on the control that relationships currently dictate on each other. And I think that what will rely, for a very significant portion of the population, I think that's going to look like a monogamous, lifelong relationship that will be so much more full of growth and joy and fluidity because of the freedom and the lack of definition of marriage as we currently hold it.
There's a thing around polyamory that I feel like you can live in a monogamous relationship if you allow each other to be all of the different versions of you that you are, and not put each other in boxes. And then you're in a polyamorous relationship. It's two bodies. There's so many different versions of ourselves that we get to be.
I believe that every single being should be constantly in a state of polyamory in this new definition of it, which is, as we covered earlier, sex magic is not about our current, physical manifestation of sex. It's about this high creative energy that flows through two beings when they bring polarity between their energy fields and do high transformative work. And that can be done with your grandmother sitting playing, parcheesi or whatever you're doing. Like, it can be very, very mundane human experiences that lead to these very heightened experience of creative force within you. And if you really love the being you're living with, the only thing you want for them is to be in a constant state of love with the condition of their path. The landscape of their path, the marathon that you run shouldn't always just nourish them. You should be in bliss watching them be nourished by the marathon they're running. And so this is the state of unconditional love ultimately that we're looking for. And, whether it look like a monogamous and lifelong relationship at the sexual level in the way in which people, cohabitate or domesticate together, whatever it is, that should never limit the polyamorous experience of falling in love 5 times a day with the butterfly on the flower and the woman at the coffee shop that just served the most amazing cappuccino and whatever it is. Like, there should be this constant polyamory going on, in that we should have open hearts and there should be no social barrier to the frequency of love. Frequency of love shall have no barrier in this new future, in this new reality we live in. Every time we put a barrier on that frequency, we will create darkness, and we will then create a wound that has to go be healed probably by 3 generations forward. And so it's going to be this practice of opening our hearts and not punishing each other for opening our hearts, because right now, typically, we will use that as an opportunity. When we see somebody open their hearts to us, too often we are using that as an opportunity to wound them in an effort to protect ourselves or externalize our own pain or whatever it is. And so we must come into discipline on unconditional love as soon as possible if we hope to stay in play, because the universe only understands that's the frequency of communication in the universe. And if we don't drop into that form of communication and we continue to rely on social media or even written word or even more dangerous digital words, we will just destroy each other. And so we must move into this higher frequency of transformational communication in this condition of unconditional love, which is born out of our capacity to see beauty. So if you feel like you don't know which love is, which I spent most of my life not understanding what love was, and when I was given this pearl that the fabric of the universe is not love, it is beauty, and in our capacity to see beauty as humans, we get to vibrate in a frequency of unconditional love. And so if you feel unloved, then I guarantee you have not been given the opportunity or taken the time to find the beauty within you. And as soon as you do, you're going to realize the universe is already channeling so much unconditional love at you that you will have a hard time containing that in your body. You will go into such an ecstatic state, such a DMT release of that, oh God, oh God, oh God moment, when you realize, I am beautiful. And I have deep concerns, because I've witnessed it in one of my relationships in life, of this self-help model towards self-love. These books are put out there like with the most low vibration expressions of, trying to create mirrors to your self-beauty. And I watched my partner for years putting a little sticky note on the mirror so that in the morning it would say, you are beautiful, or I love you, or whatever it is, to try to reinforce this. A pink or yellow little sticky note, like literally the lowest valued mechanism of communication possible. And people are now writing I love you on this little thing that's designed to be tossed in a second. it is such a low vibration expression of love for self. It just shatters my heart to have watched that for years and realize that I could never help that person, which I did. That was the disease I created, was I believed I could help that person get to that state of self-love. But the more sticky notes I saw, scattered around the house, the more I realized, like, oh my gosh, if this is the world's path and this is the chosen path to self-love, is 0.1 cent sticky notes with a kind of absent-mindedly scribbled "I love you" or "you are a miracle" or whatever is on there, there's no way that person will ever be able to receive the vibration of love that I'm putting out and seeing their beauty, because they're so distracted by these low vibration expressions that they've been taught to. And so I fear that I'm doing that in my own life every day. I'm using very, very low mechanisms to remind myself that I love myself. And so my self-work time or my self-care time, these terms that have been thrown out there by all these self-help books, I think are really damaging, because basically I'm writing a couple books right now, and it's been so funny to hear all these publishers be like, whoa, this is a lot of content. This is a lot of big stuff, a lot of big thoughts. Could you just write a book where it's like, do these 3 things, just do these 6 things and you'll be happy? Because I can sell a lot of those books. And I just laugh. I'm like, there is no freaking way I'm going to do that. There's just absolutely no way I'm going to put out a self-help, do these 3 things and you'll be a happy human book. Like, it's just, I will be part of the disease. And yet, how many times do I do that to myself on a daily basis?
I've had the same with my intuition book and then course, and then just like, okay, well, can you just show that by following your intuition, you're going to make money? And I'm like, but that's not the abundance that we're talking about here. Your intuition isn't a gateway to live like this ridiculous life that we've been shown on social media and through Hollywood of what a good life is. Your intuition is going to put you on your path, and then you're going to experience the abundant nature of your soul, and you can't even express what that's going to be like.
They can't sell that book. What do I do, Amisha? That's going to be useless for their publishing plans. They can't sell that book. That sounds too good to be true. So I think, if you want to do self-love and you need a note, then it should be done on the most expensive parchment paper you can afford. And you should get a calligraphy pen and write yourself a love letter in iambic pentameter, as Shakespeare would have, and write the most intense love story ever towards yourself, of your love for your path, of your love for the vibration of this plane flying over, whatever it is. This life is vibrational, and if you're not in it, you're gonna fail to write your own love song, your own love note. And if you're not weeping by looking at the quality by which you wrote yourself the love letter, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And so if you're going to go about displaying self-love, it better be magnificent in its expression. And if you can't think of a magnificent way to love yourself, then just go into silence and dance in that for a while. It's going to be so much more of a high vibrational experience than a sticky note.
Or go into your body and actually dance and let the energy of the love from in you just permeate through you until you feel like you're making love to everything.
The air around you. It's just, that ecstatic state. We did this amazing practice together as a group after we went through some intense shadow work, looking at, in the little subgroup that I was working on with these 4 people, it was shadow work around the wounded masculine and the trauma that has been experienced by women, and the shadow work of the male not stepping into its power out of fear that it would be a perpetrator. And so this violent suppression of both the feminine and the divine masculine happening through this interaction. So it was super intense work, and I was nearly taken to a pulverized state by just the amount of weight I was feeling in the conversation that was so channeled in this healing process. And I just didn't even know if I could even move again. I didn't want to even really live after I had seen this much and had this woman speaking so much truth about the pain of being the victim of the wounded masculine. And I was just so buried in it. And then suddenly this woman came in and did this sacred geometry dance with us and had us stand up, and we started dancing these patterns of this mandala. And the men were in the circle together, and she had us, place one hand on our heart and then our left hand behind the heart of the man next to us. So we created this lake of held hearts of men in the circle, and the state of brotherhood that happened in those few seconds was just so profound. And then she had the women in the group moving in this sacred geometry with their hands held in this kind of collapsing and expanding flower of movement in a spiral. And then she spun the men as we held each other's hearts. We spun us in the opposite direction. And then pretty soon she had us all spinning in the room individually and just spinning out compassion and unconditional love to the universe as we let the healing work transcend the body. It was the only thing that could have gotten me off that pavement. I think it would have taken me weeks to recover from that had somebody not gotten me moving. And so I love that you bring up the dance as a pathway, because too often we think that, meditation and silence is going to be the thing. Meditation and silence will connect you to an awareness of the flow of the universe through you. And for that, you will begin to see beauty. But as soon as you start to see the beauty, you're going to have to deal with the consequences, which is to see the truth of what we've created and the horror that we've created and the devil within us that we've created. We're going to have to come to that, and it's going to nearly crush us. And it's going to be the movement and the dance and the community that's going to get us, back on our feet quickly again. So we definitely need more dance, and we definitely need more fireside chats and deep storytelling and all of that as a community, and a lot less screens and a lot less, somebody else's story. And we need to tell our own stories to each other, and so we can heal faster.
We share our organic jiggery story.
I think that's yours. You captured that one so good. Tell us what that is.
We were sitting in a restaurant. I was having a chai, and they brought, in India, there's jaggery, which is a sweet, and you can use it instead of sugar, and it has some nicer qualities to it. And this said organic jiggery instead of jaggery. And it's just one of the best typos that I've ever seen. Ever.
And we were so needing it because we had just dropped into like super deep space seconds before. And so we were sharing some deep, I think, ache and just reality too, just of how big we were. And it was just like this space of intense reverence towards what I was feeling towards you, at least. I just felt this awareness suddenly of your bigger version of yourself. And I was just in awe and dumbstruck by it. And then you burst out laughing when you looked down at the jaggery that had become jiggery. And watching you go from that solemnity of regalness that you carry and getting to see some very big version of that, and then watch that big being burst out in joy and laughter was one of the most exquisite things of the week. So I'm celebrating the jiggery within you.
We need more jiggity. Jiggity is the medicine.
So good.
And I am someone that's very connected to the waters and the grief, and I'm also really connected to the rage and the Kali and all of it. And one of the things that's really come alive for me is the joy and the laughter, and the ability of the laughter just to move things and rewire everything. And I feel like I have released, shifted, transformed a lot of sadness and grief during this time through joy and laughter and jiggity.
Yeah, it has been a joyful couple of weeks, we got to say. If there's this much levity in finding your path and walking with community, then there's nothing that can really slow us down, because the levity is such an accelerant, and it's just been so fun to laugh hysterically together at so many points in the week. And I think each person, it's interesting that we didn't have like the comic in the group. Sometimes groups will manifest like their comedian. I feel like everybody brought their own version of hilarity to this thing, and everybody had their moment of breaking down into pure, authentic tears of grief, and everybody had their moment of just hilarious contribution that had us all in stitches. And so we were seeing the whole human gamut of expression expressed in every single individual. It was like the hologram of the community.
Everyone had their moments of being a bit pissed off.
Yeah,
with others,
sure.
or
Exhausted
not
and
connecting,
too much.
All of those bits are part of it, and it's creating community where you can laugh, where you can cry, where you're not judging each other's experiences all the time and putting each other into boxes, where you're just allowing it all to move through, knowing that the Zach or the Amisha that was here 10 minutes ago is already gone.
Into the ethers.
and you can't hold on to the us of 6 months ago or 3 days ago, or just to be in whatever this expression is in this moment, and that we can do that with and for each other. And that is the greatest gift and the greatest medicine that we can give each other at this time, is the power of our presence and the power to allow each other to be in presence and to let go of any ideas of who we imagine people to be and who we need them to be to feel safe, but just to let them really be who they are. And it's not easy. I made it sound really easy there. It's not easy, but this is the invitation that we're in now, not to box each other in with rules and dogma, and just to allow that natural evolution that's always wanting to happen to be here.
Maybe so. Let's do it. I'm ready.
And there was one moment that I really enjoyed that's food related. You said earlier about how it's not about all of the supplements, and it's not about the pea shot injecting your penis with whatever.
Yeah.
And all of these things that are happening. And of course, supplements can be helpful at different moments, and fresh spirulina can be so nourishing, whatever it is. But there was this moment that we shared at Anshul's farm where you had us all down on our knees eating coriander straight from the earth.
Yeah.
And it was delicious.
What did it taste like? You remember?
Heaven.
It didn't taste like any coriander you've ever eaten and picked, right? And then I had you pick it. And it became the coriander we're used to tasting.
Yeah. Can you explain why it tastes so good and what it does to our system to eat straight from the earth? Because that feels like such a key, that we can have a mint plant or something in our house and we can nibble it every morning, and that can change our complete experience of
reality. Yeah, so we're the only species that has chosen to eat dying food. Every time you remove a root from the earth or pick a fruit from a plant, you've reversed the water spin within it. And so in a generative state, that carrot or that tomato on the vine has a water spin that is rightward. And so there's this rightward spin in the physics quality of the water itself is spinning around the nutrients around the atomic structure of a tomato. And as soon as you pluck it and it loses its direct connection within a millionth of a second, it reverses its water spin and starts into a decay process. And unfortunately, the longer our supply chains, or perhaps by design, so that we are forced to go closer to the earth, the longer our supply chains, the more minutes and days that has passed since that thing got picked, the more death lies within the food that you're about to consume, and the less generative, life-giving forces within the food. And what I'm always amazed by, coriander, such an, cilantro for Americans listening, we're used to cilantro being a very polarizing taste. Most people have an initial aversion to it, soapy, or it tastes really bitter or whatever it is. But the last person that I had down on their hands and knees in that garden, eating directly from the plant, so experiencing the flavor of it, with still the nutrients and the sugars and everything else connected to the rightward spin, it was sweet, not bitter. It was, sweet and even some umami in there, not bitter and soapy. And so, if you picked it, the distance that it took from you to reach down and pick it from the earth and then get it to your mouth, it tasted like the coriander, the cilantro you're used to tasting. And so I find it very fascinating that every other animal is grazing from living plants, and we are consuming, quote unquote, regenerative, organic, super duper, greens that were ground down into powder, dehydrated, sent thousands of miles, and then reconstituted in water that's dead. And then we're like, well, I'm having a $20 smoothie, so I must be doing health. I was like, no, sister, you are just so far from nature, and it can't nourish you. It can only be part of your journey, and it doesn't mean that it's a bad or negative. It's just part of your journey towards discovering that your vitality is not going to come from a food system that's delivering you powdered versions of reality. You need to tap into that nature beneath your feet, and you need to get down on your hands and knees and taste what food tastes like in the garden before it's harvested. Be part of the life force of it rather than the extractive death at the end of its cycle. The fun thing about it, though, as you noted, is that it doesn't mean that everybody needs to be on their hands and knees grazing all day, because it actually only takes a split second of being in communication with that rightward water spin for your whole body to adjust. And this is what homeopathy does. It takes a living life force of something and puts it into the water structure and spins it in a rightward fashion. So you end with 100 cycles of rightward spin in the vessel that you're preparing the homeopathy.
That's why you can't touch the homeopathy, like.
Yeah, because your water structure is likely in a deteriorating state, and you want that living water spin, so that when that homeopathy goes into your tongue, you're tasting life force. You're being recoded with life force, and it's just so potent, this homeopathy, tool to show us the power of water in its rightward spin. And so, if you have that mint plant, or if you are around picked food, don't have access to something growing in the ground, then I would say, prepare food homeopathically, meaning stir it in a vortex as you're preparing it, and so it might be rinse the carrots in water, but you're going to spin those carrots, for 100 spins in a simple little pot instead of just running chlorinated water. Pour that water into a pot, let the chlorine off gas. It only takes 5-10 seconds for the chlorine to be out of there anyway, so let the pot sit for half a minute, and then start stirring the pot with the carrots in a rightward fashion 100 times to get that rightward spin going in there, because the macro spin can recode the micronutrient delivery as the water continues to program itself in that relationship. So get everything back into rightward spin. Ironically, salad spinners are really good at doing this, and so using a salad spinner, picking your own lettuce, and getting it right before you serve it back into a rightward spin through that spinner will be a good approach to just increasing the nutrient availability and the vitality within the food that you're about to consume. If you are down to the point of trying to reconstitute powders for your nutrition, then for God's sake, stir vigorously in a rightward fashion, because you're a long ways from life in that powder.
Clockwise?
Yeah, clockwise, yeah.
And this bit, I just want to highlight that I found really fascinating, that if you do take that bite of your plant, that then everything else you consume that day and the water that you drink will affect your body differently.
Yeah.
Which is wild.
It's totally wild. When we do this with the supplements we make, we're delivering fossil soil through a liquid supplement to pets and animals and humans and all this. And what we're finding is that because we get those carbon molecules into our rightward spin, these are capable of grabbing nutrients out of the food and delivering them in super high volumes into the cell. So example is in the lab, we have somebody consume like the most expensive liposomal turmeric on the market, and then measure their urine an hour later to show that none of it actually got into their bloodstream and into the urine and delivered to the cellular level. Compare that to the same turmeric stirred into these carbon molecules that are activated by the bacteria and fungi. So you have an organified nutrient, just as the soil would to the coriander that hasn't been picked. If you literally replant the nutrient in soil, which is basically what's happening in this liquid state, you're getting the nutrients replanted in that biologic, organified state. We're seeing 3,000 nanograms per milliliter of urine with turmeric. Like, it's just logarithmically more bioavailable to the body when the soil is reintroduced with the food. And this is actually not a new concept. If a lot of African traditional cooking included a tablespoon of soil, and so they would put soil in, and they became so accustomed to understanding that taste of food appropriately planted back in its soil that many African American communities, and not just the ones from that have been living here for the last couple of hundred years, but those that are now moving, and transplanting to the U.S. as new immigrants, are pretty quickly realizing that none of their African stews are tasting right, and so they're having their communities send them soil samples to add to their stew so that it tastes right.
Because they don't want the soil.
It just doesn't taste right. If you try to use American soil, it just doesn't taste right. And it makes a lot of sense once you start to understand these small carbon molecules. So we've had a lot of fun with these supplements that we're making, because it means that, most people are buying food or buying supplements that just get pooped or peed out. And to be able to mix a little bit of this soil substance into every meal has really transformed a lot of families. We've affected, a million families around the world now, and it's just so potent to imagine them replanting their nutrients of every meal back within the intelligence of soil systems, so that we are back in that regenerative state with every bite of food that we consume. It just takes a teaspoon again or a tablespoon of this liquid into your pot of soup or into the water before you boil the rice, the pasta, whatever you're preparing. Like it's this beautiful dance of getting the nutrients back into the soil intelligence and the vibrational energy within the food. So this is the future of food, is we will understand how to interact with water and its relationship to the soil, so that we're always growing human life rather than accelerating dis-ease of the human organism through the food and water we currently consume.
And for those that are new to ION, that don't know about this supplement, you can literally, you can buy it, and it really supports your gut. And we shared more about that in an earlier podcast. And just putting a little bit of it, like either having it by itself or having it with your other powders. And then you were saying that you could have the ion and then like have the powders like afterwards. Like it doesn't have to always be together.
That's right. You don't necessarily have to dissolve it in it. You still get about 70% of the efficacy.
Is there a time frame on that?
It's probably in the minutes range. So anything over 30 to 60 minutes, you're probably losing that efficacy, because the stomach emptying time is pretty short. And so if your stomach is releasing the ion supplement before your food gets there, that it's there. But it does work after the meal too, for a period of time. Probably again 30 to 60 minutes after the meal is probably adequate too. So you've got a window of time to add that to get that soil matrix back into the nutrient reservoir that your food has within it, to release that reservoir back into its organified state of bioavailability and vitality and this rightward spin and everything else. So it's actually quite flexible in some ways. The frequency can be very helpful though. Like doing it once a day is great. But doing it with every meal, doing that 3-4 times a day, anytime nutrients are coming into your body, it's threefold, fourfold. It's accelerating the nutrient availability. It's also accelerating protein synthesis and all the other things we talked about, I think, probably on the last podcast. But so there's lots of beauty in it. But around this just concept of how close is your food to the soil, it's a pretty fascinating journey in the science lab that we've taken these last couple of years to have just such beautiful demonstration of the way that we were designed to be nourished by this planet, was to not pick anything, not to literally just walk around the garden and bite the fruit off the vine. This nature was developed to be in such a bountiful state with us that there would be no concept of farming and harvest. And this is the oldest myth we have. At the beginning of life, we were in the Garden of Eden. There was no toil. There was simply bounty on the surface of the planet, and therefore multicellular life became, supported. And we didn't have to invent farming so humans could develop. Like it's not how it worked. We developed because there was a nutrient reservoir that was so beautiful and dense that we could make this leap to human connectivity and human consciousness, human biology, all this stuff. And then we've just, cut nature out from under us at every step of our path, unfortunately, and we're just not connected to that nature anymore, but easy to reconnect.
That apple wasn't eaten directly from the tree.
Yeah, I think that's really possible, that that decrement of our sense of connectedness was perhaps through a quote unquote convenience of something that was given to us, and we mistook the appearance of convenience for nourishment.
And you're expanding ION from the gut support into the brain and...
Yeah, brain and vascular immune system. And we've got a skin one that's been out for a long time. That's been a game changer. If you doubt what's happening inside your body, it's easy to spray the skin one on and see it in real time. Like within seconds of spraying it, you get to see an increasing glow, literal glow of the skin, because you're literally increasing the metabolism of the keratinocytes. So you're literally increasing the amount of light energy that mitochondria are producing inside of your skin.
We heard yesterday that the skin is the biggest listening
It's your
organ
ears,
that
right?
we have, bigger than it.
Yeah, so it goes drop into experience of listening to sound or listening to the vibration of the universe in meditation. Your skin is the sense organ there. So increasing its vitality increases your capacity to hear nature, hear the reality of beauty. It's a potent thing. Skin's a fascinating organ. It's also where we breathe mostly. We do a ton of breath through the skin. We do the vast majority of detox through our skin. We do all kinds of beautiful things with that organ, and it gets dumbed down and covered with hundreds of carcinogens every day for the typical woman now. There's about 170 carcinogens in a daily experience of a woman who's engaged with the typical, skincare and cosmetics lines that are currently on the market. It's well over 100 carcinogens a day.
And clothing full of pesticides or polyesters where your skin can't breathe.
Microplastics and entering the bloodstream, the whole thing. So we've been blessed this week to be staying in these Ayurvedic, ashrams and hostels and everything, and to be drenched in oil, that sucking that stuff out of your skin is a really potent experience, and it's led to moments of really intense detox for me, and it's been fascinating. So yeah, it's beautiful to let our bodies start to breathe again, to sense and see the beauty, so we can vibrate in that unconditional love. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Do you have a call to action to close us out with?
No call to action, maybe just invitation to just go outside and lay down under a tree if you're inside right now, and just find a piece of nature to bathe in. And rather than trying to witness the beauty of the tree, I guess I would invite you to be seen by the tree, and you'll be blown away by just how beautiful you are when you let the tree see you. Let down your egoic shield. You're safe. The oak's not going to hurt you. It loves unconditionally all the time, and so let the tree see you. And then just bathe in that for a few minutes and reset, just restart, start again. That's the calling that we all have every day. Start again. Surrender everything you've ever thought or believed was valuable in your life. Start again. Engage the universe, see what bounty is you're willing to receive today. See what kind of Garden of Eden starts to emerge around you as you become more willing to receive.
Let's go do it. Let's go sit under a tree.
Let's do it.
Thank you.
Gratitude. Thank you, Amisha.
Such a
it's
joy.
Wonderful to be with you.
Thank you for listening. We hope that you have enjoyed this episode and it has sparked some inspiration and creativity in you. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on allthatweare.org. We give space to our guests to share their perspective without debating it or fact-checking, as this approach allows for deep, unedited conversations from the heart. We trust your discernment and wisdom to take what is useful and challenge what isn't in your own understanding. We offer spaces for discussion and integration in our membership community, which we would love for you to join. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible by you, our beautiful community. If you loved this and would like to connect more deeply with us, please join our membership. You choose what you contribute based on our sliding scale, and you become a patron whose support makes this podcast happen, as well as receiving access to a library of many resources and invitations to nourishing events. Please also hit subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen so others can find us. This podcast is made by an all-female global team. Me, Amisha Gadiali, producer and host, Anna Greta Folderbach, who crafts the words that accompany each episode, and Mary Chan, who edits the sound so skillfully. All That We Are celebrates all that we are already and the untapped potential that lives inside us. It invites the full power of the more than human world, nature, the unseen, our ancestors and our future generations. It reminds us that we never exist in silo, through borders, timelines, or polarity, that in each and every moment, all that we are is here.